Can anyone hear me on this? A little bit? Do I need to move it up? Is this on? What about, you can hear it. Well, I'll just use the handheld. Where do I put it? Oh. Okay, we're trying this. Ah. All right. Is everyone about ready to start? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Because I really want you guys to be able to leave on time. If you didn't get one of the folders on the table in the entryway, you might want to grab one. I just printed out the notes version of my PowerPoint. That way, if you wanted to make any notes, you could. So my name is Melissa Pinto, and I'm a licensed teacher, which is why you have handouts. Because I've been a teacher for almost 20 years, and I started out as a English teacher in high school, and I taught junior high and high school, and then we had children, and I quit teaching other people's children so I could teach our own. Just a little bit of extra history for your benefit. Before Philip and I got married, one of the things that we discussed was the education of our children, or future children at that point. And Philip was very adamant, as was I, that our children needed to have a Christian education. But he was so adamant, it really was a deal breaker. He was like, our children either will be in a Christian school or you're going to be homeschooling them. And I knew that when I married him, I'd be moving to Raven Springs, Arkansas, and there's no Christian school anywhere around. So I knew before we even got married that I would be homeschooling our children. And so I spent the 5 years from when we got married to when we finally had children really teaching myself to become a teacher. And so, I had the opportunity to be more prepared to homeschool our children than a lot of people do. And so my perspective on homeschooling is really in many ways different because I had all that extra preparation time. I wasn't, I didn't put our children into the public school and then have to pull them out for a reason. So I had that intent from the very start. And so, it does kind of change the approach to homeschooling when you're all of a sudden thrust into it and you haven't had the prep time. I was telling Erin and her family the other day that I remember I was pregnant with our first child, and I remember going to the homeschool conference in Searcy with other friends who were homeschooling, and I just really spent as much time researching and preparing for homeschooling. So so that really shaped how I homeschool. But I did spend the first few years of homeschooling the kids, and as we have 4 children, and as we added a kid into homeschooling, there was a lot of floundering and failing. I still flounder and fail a lot too, but so I think most of you are probably veteran homeschoolers already, so hopefully some of these tips and tricks just will be cohesive and beneficial to you. So we're going to start with a verse I memorized in high school. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. I think the first step in homeschooling is probably the most counterintuitive one, and it's bringing our hearts into submission to the will of God. It's important to recognize the magnitude of this verse. Whatever you do, you are serving the Lord Christ. Whatever you do. In all of the little things and all of the big things, we're serving Christ Jesus. And that's a really big deal when we recognize that we are answering to Jesus for our actions, even in homeschooling. It really changes our approach. You know, when you think about the oversight that you have as a parent, who are you answerable to? Well, your spouse, but, you know, ultimately you're answering to Jesus for what you do. And so when you really make that your focus, it changes how you approach everything. Homeschooling becomes much more than just another job for us to do or another task to cross off our list. It really becomes a holy calling from the Lord. And I even look at it as another way for us to really worship the Lord and enter into his presence and his glory, because, you know, we're serving the Lord with all of our hearts. And then another verse here. She looks well to the way of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Proverbs 31:27. Moms often get tired of the Proverbs 31 woman. But this verse really plays in my head quite a bit when I start thinking of all the jobs that I have. And it really ties in with this first verse. When we recognize that our work is for the Lord first, and then ourselves and our families second, we really make this verse a reality in our lives. And so when we seriously undertake the complete education of our children, not just the schooling, the ciphering and the reading and the writing, but the complete education, the spiritual formation of our kids and the character building of our children, the whole complete education of our children, we're looking well to the ways of our households, and we definitely don't have time to be idle. So if you get nothing else from this, really, really evaluate, am I really working as to the Lord? Is what I'm doing really for God's glory, or am I just trying to get through the day? What is my motivation? And that kind of brings me to what we called I went to Williams Baptist College. I finished out my degree there, and in the education department, we had to write what was called the philosophy of education. And we had to keep this big portfolio of all of our work and our lesson plans, all the papers that we had written, and it was part of our grade and part of the completion of the education program in college. But the first document we were required to write and have, it was called our philosophy of education. And the purpose was to articulate what our motivators were for teaching. Why were we teaching? What did we expect to get out of it? How were we going to deal with hurdles as they came up? How would we deal with classroom discipline? What were our philosophies about all of that? It really was supposed to be a mission statement that outlined our ideals for teaching. And it really was what we considered our why for teaching. And it helped keep us in the game when things got difficult. And so I often think about that in the realm of homeschooling. So think about, what is your why? And I think it's very important to really know why you're choosing to homeschool your child. And the reason I say this is because you're going to have many days that make you want to feed your children to the wolves. You're going to have days of overwhelm. You're going to have days of depression. You're going to have a lot of days where you'd much rather be doing something fun than homeschooling and educating your children. And it's when you have those down days or your hard days that knowing your why really keeps you from giving up. It helps encourage you to start fresh the next day if you've had a major failure. It just helps you to really remember what your purpose for homeschooling is. And to just illustrate that for you, some people, their why is because they just want to spend all the time that they can with their kid or children. And that's great. Some people just don't want the government involved in any way in their lives. And so they're homeschooling not really because they're as concerned for the education of their kids, but they just don't want government oversight. Some people homeschool because they think they can do a better job than the public school system. Some people homeschool because of the social atmosphere. They don't want their kids involved in some of the things that go on in public schools. I mean, there's a whole long list. For me, I really had to sit down and really articulate for myself, why am I really driven to homeschool? And what I have realized over the years is, for me, the most important thing that I want my children to have is the gospel of Christ and the word of the Lord poured into their hearts. And I mean, from early on, that has always been my goal. And I'm the first to tell you, we have gaps in our education. I mean, unfortunately, that happens in homeschooling. But, you know, as long as your kid can read and write and do basic math, they're going to survive as an adult. But my calling, my why, is to teach my children to love the Lord with all of their hearts, their minds, and their souls. I really do value giving our kids a good education, but really at the end of the day, it's their relationship with Jesus I'm most concerned about. And so that's my why, is to just pour God into their lives, to help them develop a strong Christian worldview so that they can approach, as Dr. McDonald was speaking about, different values and different worldviews, that they're so grounded in their faith that when they reach college and reach the ages where they're having to be, they have to stand up for their beliefs, they're able to do that because they have the firm foundation in the Lord. So that's my why. And anyway, I challenge you to come up with, what is your why? All right. Some other things here. The next tip, or whatever that you want to say, for homeschooling is the need for consistency and routine. So successful homeschooling really in some ways hinges on setting up routines and consistency when it comes to school. Now, for those of you who are really free spirits, I'm not saying that you have to have this rigid schedule. And those of us who are more schedule driven, maybe you need to take a step back and be more of a free spirit. But it really is important to take a step back and look at your lives and your routines. A lot of people want to really focus on homeschooling isn't supposed to look like public school. And that's true. I mean, homeschooling has a lot of freedom. But if you don't have a plan, then there's going to become a lack of consistency. And before you know it, a whole school year will fly by. And how much school have you done with your kids? You know, so we have to take the education of our children seriously. So homeschooling offers families incredible freedom. You can set up your schedules and daily routines that best fit the need of your family. It means if your children will do it, you can let your kids sleep until 7:30 or 8 or 10 or whatever time you want to, and you can have a leisurely morning before you really get started on school. It also means that you can teach your children who are early risers, those are my children, to get a jump start on school first thing in the morning. I have 2 children who pretty much they get up and are started on school at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they have an hour or 2 of school done before I get breakfast ready for everyone. So, I mean, you have the ability to really tailor homeschooling to, you know, your lifestyle. You don't have to start at the crack of dawn, but I do want to encourage you, if you don't have a good handle on school, at least in the morning before lunch, it's going to be really hard to get school done. And when your children are little, it's not so much of a big deal, but once they start getting into the upper grades, school takes more time. You know, it takes more time in middle school and high school than it did in first grade to go through your daily lessons and things. So I always really coach parents to go ahead, set up your schedule the way you want to do it, but have a consistent time every day for school. Your children really thrive on a consistency and a routine. And once again, it doesn't mean that you have to be extremely rigid, but children really get a lot of security in routine. And even if your routine is Mondays we do this, and then the next day on Tuesday our schedule is completely different, on Wednesday we do yet a different schedule, they at least know, they learn that routine. And so there's some order and consistency that really helps ground children. Let's see. You do just want to be really honest at what's going to work best for you and your family, especially you, because you're the teacher. And then I think a side benefit of just having a consistent schedule, it models for your children self-discipline and perseverance. All right, so let's see. Moving on to time management. And it's really an extension of setting routines and consistency in your homeschool. If you know me at all, I'm a procrastinator, a really bad procrastinator. I am more reformed than I used to be. But honestly, I will put things off because I'd much rather do something fun and play than do hard work. So that's a huge part of me, but I'm also a planner at the same time. So I have two personalities fighting inside me sometimes. But I really do love to plan things. I'm actually really good at planning. Follow through is sometimes a challenge, but time management skills do take practice. So if you're a person who manages your time well, then this really is a no-brainer for you. But if you're someone who struggles, it's just something that you have to really practice, and then you'll eventually get good at it, or at least passable with it, right? It's just like managing your money. If you don't have a plan in place with your money, then you'll all of a sudden not have any money and you don't know where it went. The same thing is with your time. If you don't have a plan in place, then all of a sudden all the things that you're supposed to get done, they're not done, and you don't have time. And when you're homeschooling your children, that becomes detrimental to them. So you have to have a plan for homeschooling your children, because if you don't have a plan, then all of a sudden, once again, school year's going to fly by, and oh no, we haven't done 2/3 of our of our curriculum, and what's going to happen to our kids? So just setting a plan is a good thing. Let's see. So I suggest engage some sort of daily planner, even if it's just for making a daily list. I use my planner for a lot of different things. I could teach a 2-hour course just on time management. I'm not going to do that today, but anyway, I always take a couple of days before the start of our school year to look through the curriculum and the teacher's guides. And to look at our schedules and look at, okay, do we have any therapies that we have to do this year, or any doctor's appointments, or what about music lessons or different things. I take just a couple of days at the start of the school year and really sit down and think through all of that, and then try to set up kind of a daily schedule, and I use my planner for that. I have a really good planner. That if you're interested, you can talk to me afterwards. And what I like about this planner is it helps me also, it has just a real simple cleaning schedule in it, because when you're homeschooling, you still have to take care of your house. I mean, homeschooling is a full-time job, but caring for your home and feeding your family, everything, that's all still something that you have to do. So just, it has a simple cleaning schedule and daily tasks. A really dear friend of mine quite a few years ago coached me to set up just a daily cleaning schedule so that I wouldn't be overwhelmed all of the time, because I really was at that point. And it was just really simple. It was assigning a room to the day of the week. So I just looked at, okay, I have 6 days of the week where I will clean and do things. And so, I think Mondays was I would clean the bathrooms, and Tuesday it was clean the kitchen. And not that I didn't pick those areas up, but it was the deeper cleaning. And it really changed my life, and it was just such a simple concept, but it really changed my approach to life. Another thing that I like to do is I call it the 5-minute rule, and a lot of tasks can really be broken down into smaller tasks and can be very manageable. And I do this with the kids. I'll be like, okay, we have 5 minutes. You have this room, you have this room. In 5 minutes, let's see how much you can get picked up. And 5 minutes is not an overwhelming amount of time. And you set a timer and see how much that you can get done. Do that in all sorts of different ways. And it also makes tasks seem more enjoyable because you only have to do it for 5 minutes. Or see if you can unload and load the dishwasher in less than 5 minutes, then it becomes almost a challenge. So break down tasks. Don't feel like you have to accomplish everything for your home and everything. Just break it down. I talked about cleaning schedule. Also, something that happens a lot when you're homeschooling is, we have all sorts of free time. So we'll meet you at the park. And we're going to go to story time at the library. And I need to get groceries. And before you know it, you've gone and done all these other things, but you still haven't done school. So I always suggest you do school in the morning and then schedule appointments either for your afternoons, or just set one day a week aside as I'm going to do all my errands and appointments as much as possible on that time, and then we're home the rest of the week to really focus on school. Once again, it seems like these should be no-brainers, but if you don't consciously make that a plan, your time will get away from you. All right, so meal planning, what does that have to do with homeschooling, right? So guess what? When you homeschool, you're not only, the teacher and the janitor, you're also the lunch lady. And so I don't know about you guys, but I have kids who like to eat all the time. And it can be really burdensome. And so it really, once again, meal planning is an extension of time management and just consistency and routine. So I always suggest, and I do it myself, where I take one afternoon a month and I plan out the meals, 3 meals a day and snacks for the whole month. And there are times where I'm like, I really hate this job, because just trying to think through, okay, what are we gonna eat on this day? But the great thing about doing that is, it's just like any other plan. There's flexibility. Like, you don't have to be like, I said we were going to have tacos today, but I don't have anything for tacos, so I'm going to have to go to the store. You can be flexible, but it gives you just one more support to help you get through a busy day of school and life. And so just having a plan in place just makes things easier, even with food. So you really do save yourself quite a bit of stress. If you have a really bad, difficult day with your kids schooling, trying to come up with dinner at the end of the day sometimes is overwhelming. So if you have that plan in place, and at least I know something. Today, we're going to be able to eat lasagna for dinner tonight because I've already got it ready or whatever. So you will thank yourself for taking time to plan meals. You can also do meal prep in advance, and I can tell you more about that at a different time as well. So those are basics that really will, if you can get those under control, it makes educating your children easier. So you're like, well, home management wasn't really what I was expecting. But if you can get some of those home management things under your belt, it just makes the actual task of teaching your children a little bit easier. So with homeschooling, everything you do, you're teaching your children, so. But now we're going to focus more on strategies that are actually going to help you as teachers. So the first thing that you really need to think about is, what is your instructional style? Like, we want to focus on our kids, but before we can really teach our kids, we need to really think about, what kind of teacher am I? Not even what kind of teacher do I want to be, but let's be realistic. What type of teacher am I? And what type of teaching style do I want to adopt and use? So there's all sorts of different instructional styles. I've listed quite a few on here. You could Google instructional styles of teaching, and you can get a plethora of information. So there's teacher-centered instruction, and that's what we're used to. That's where everything centers on the teacher. The teacher makes all the decisions. It's teacher-led. It's very traditional in a lot of ways. Teacher-led is easiest. And you just have to kind of go with what's best for you. Student-led learning is kind of a newer trend. I see a lot of people kind of going to that. I think they also call it unschooling. Student-led learning is letting your kids decide what they want to learn. Now, for me, I struggle with that because I looking at the big picture, I see areas that my children don't want to learn, but that they need. And so, with any instructional style, it is important to know the pros and cons of both. Project-based instruction, that's more of a hands-on approach. So kids are doing projects. And Montessori instruction is kind of the same thing. It's more of a hands-on and crossing curriculums. Charlotte Mason is a nature-based program, and it's more than that, but it really centers on being in the outdoors and tying what we're learning into nature and our surroundings. Literature-based instruction is starting with a story and then building your history and your science and your grammar, everything around maybe what you're reading. And so it's more of a questioning and answering, kind of a Socratic style of teaching. One that's easy for people who maybe are kind of afraid of teaching or need extra help, or if you're good with younger kids and you're scared about high school, online and video instruction. That's a type of actually instructional style where you become more of a facilitator and a tutor versus the actual teacher. There's, like I said, many, many more. One thing I want to say is, if you're trying to figure out a curriculum, you want to go to the Educational Alliance's website, because they have a whole list in alphabetical order of homeschool curriculum, and it's a clickable link to that provider's website with information about that curriculum. So it's really, really nice to go on there and just research curriculum. It's kind of a one-stop to get you to all sorts of curriculum there. So I always suggest that people go to the Education Alliance website, actually, because of how thorough it is. So anyway, so you want to take time to research the different methods of instruction and decide what is going to work best for you as a teacher, because realistically, it is about your kids, but you have to pick something that you're going to be able to teach. If you want to do Charlotte Mason, well, you better be a person who really loves being outside and in nature a lot, and spending time looking at trees and the grass and, rambling, which is wonderful. But if you don't like being outside, you're not going to thrive in that curriculum. So take time to research the curriculum. But then you do want to look at your child's learning style, and knowing how your child learns is going to benefit them. It's going to benefit you. It will really help them as they grow and develop into adults. So you get to tailor your learning to your child. When I was in college, there were really only three main types: your visual learners, your auditory learners, and your kinesthetic or your hands-on learners. They've since added more learning styles to add in verbal and logical or mathematical, social learners, and then solitary learners. There's usually an overlap. You can look at your kids and know which kid learns better by doing versus the kid who learns better by listening. As a teacher, I really suggest incorporating all three of those main learning styles. Experience has really taught me that if I write it down, and if I hear it, and if I say it, I'm more likely to remember that information than just if I just hear it or if I just write it down. So, teaching your children to overlap those styles, even if maybe they're hands-on learners and they're not oral or auditory learners, teaching them to listen and then repeat, and you're teaching them to go beyond themselves. Let's see. Sometimes you might need to make accommodations to your curriculum because if you have more than one child, it's really difficult to have a different curriculum for each child. So you probably are going to pick one curriculum and make it fit for all of your children. So sometimes you might want to make an accommodation to that. And accommodations just mean that you're making a change of some sort to the assignment to benefit your child, or to make the assignment more doable for your student. Oftentimes, it's used in the mainstream classroom for struggling learners or for students who have learning disabilities. But, it's also just an accommodation could be if you have a child who has a hard time or gets really tired of writing answers to questions. You can accommodate by saying, okay, today, instead of writing out all the answers to your questions, we're going to talk about them, and you're going to tell me the answers. So that's just a simple accommodation. So it's just kind of changing things to meet the learning style of your child. I want to caution that you don't make it a norm to always accommodate, because if you're always accommodating, you're not teaching your children that to overcome difficult tasks. Okay, so it is important to teach your children that even if something is hard, you can come alongside them and give them tools to learn to overcome some of those difficulties. Now, if you have a child who has special needs or who has a learning disability, then you will do more accommodating, and there's nothing wrong with that. You still will be teaching your child to overcome things, but accommodations can make your life a little bit easier as well. So just recognizing if you have if a child who has I call them a learning challenge, because you can teach your child to overcome to a certain degree certain disabilities. So I think of them more as a challenge and being able to accommodate and work around those. But just how do you know? So I always start with making a list of things that you think might be a little off, or I'm concerned because it's taking too long to do one subject, or an example, when all of our children, 3 of my 4 kids had special vision problems that were causing their eyes not to see what was printed on the paper. Like they had perfect vision, but when it came time to learn how to read, I thought they were maybe dyslexic or there was something wrong. And so like I started like noting, okay, my child who is the most compliant, who will do anything, is sitting here refusing to do this reading lesson. There's something wrong. We've got to figure this out. Okay, so, I start with a list, and then you want to talk to a doctor or others who are in the healthcare profession. In our case, I talked to a friend who is an occupational therapist, and I said, I think my child has dyslexia. What do I need to do to change my teaching approach to help that child learn how to read? And her suggestion was to get a developmental eye exam. And I've become very passionate about that. But and it was all a matter of therapy and retraining their eyes. And so sometimes we see something that might be a trigger of, oh, I think my child has a learning disability, and it's like this mountain, or this is going to be huge and tragic and horrible. And it could be something as easy as, oh, well, you just need a little bit of therapy, and it just retrains your brain, and the problem is solved. Or it could be, okay, well, we do have dyslexia or autism or a whole host of there's different disabilities. But talking to someone who is knowledgeable in that just empowers you to feel that you have the ability to help your child overcome those difficulties. And also, if you know people who are licensed, trained teachers, that's one of the things that we're taught in our education classes is to see markers for various learning disabilities. So, you can find a teacher and say, hey, my child is doing this, or this. Is that a sign of a learning disability or something else? And a teacher will usually be pretty frank with you and give what their opinion is. And then once again, I would suggest going to your doctor if you think you need further testing on different things. Special needs students, you want to recognize the learning needs of your child and then help him or her find ways to work around them. So it is very possible, and I think it's actually even better for you to homeschool a special needs child, because you have the freedom and flexibility to choose curriculum that really meets the need of your child. And you also have the ability to modify, to accommodate that curriculum and the goals and the timeline of what the child needs to achieve based on your realistic assessment of what that child's abilities are. One more note about, I kind of got off my notes here, so so just if you do have a special needs child, I want you to take heart in the fact that you know your child much better than anyone else, and you're really the most qualified person to teach your child, because you can see when your child is overwhelmed, you can see when your child needs a break, you can see when your child really needs more of a challenge and has accomplished something. You're going to celebrate those milestones and those achievements so much more than they would maybe be celebrated in the public schools. And once again, you just have the flexibility to tailor your curriculum and learning to the needs of your child. So those are just some basic teaching strategies. And then, I think finding your tribe is like the big catchphrase these days. Find your people. It is important to have a support network when you homeschool. So that's either by finding veteran homeschool parents. Before I started homeschooling, I had numerous friends who homeschooled, and I talked about it. What are your challenges? What's your favorite curriculum? And it just really helped me. But they've become a support network for me. They've become an encouragement to me over the years. Also, befriend your local librarians because librarians are like superheroes. I think they can find books for you that are for your kids. They know a lot of information. They know a lot of people. They can connect you with other people who homeschool, but they can connect you with, because they really do know so many people. If you don't know anywhere else to turn, you can say, hey, I think my child might be dyslexic. Who would I talk to about that? And they're going to know. So I honestly find a librarian and make her your friend. Also, yes.
I just wanted to say, the reason I met you is through the library.
Yes. Yes, Susan at Ash Flat, she's wonderful, and I'm thankful that she promotes homeschooling for us. Also, look for a church that's going to be supportive, because it's really hard to homeschool when everyone's looking down on you for homeschooling, and it's really hard to worship the Lord when you feel like everyone's looking down on you. So you want to find a church that's going to support you in homeschooling. You want to connect yourself with those who are going to encourage you even when you fail. So, if your family is against you homeschooling, then you better find someone who's going to encourage you, because your family's going to be telling you, oh, you can't do this. See, look at what a failure, you've messed up here and here and here. So you need people who are going to say, okay, you failed. What are you going to do differently to turn that into a success? And, who you want to align yourself with people who are going to encourage you to carry on. And I would suggest finding a homeschool group. Now, I think everyone in here is from this area, so we have a homeschool group right here. But if you know people who are homeschooling across the state who maybe need a homeschool group, go to the Education Alliance webpage, and they have under one of their tabs, they have Find a Homeschool Support Group, and they're going to connect you to homeschoolers. And so definitely, if you've never been on the Education Alliance webpage or website, you need to go and just explore it, because there's a lot of information there. But find a homeschool group. And I just want to tell you about homeschool groups. We want to kind of focus in on the socialization of our kids. But I challenge you to look at homeschool group as much more than a way to socialize your children. I want to challenge you to push past the need for socialization and instead model for your children the concept of community. Because if we can look at it that way, we're all chipping in to help each other out. It's not about me. It's about how can I help or encourage someone else. We're chipping in to give advice or encouragement. We're chipping in to teach a new skill to other children or other moms. And so by chipping in, by modeling proper behavior, we're teaching our children so much even when we go to a homeschool group. So, look at homeschool group as more than just a social club. And then finally, give yourself grace. You're going to have hard days. You're going to have great days too. And hopefully you're going to have many, many more wonderful, great days than hard days. But, I think if you go back to the beginning and you look at that verse again, whatever you do, work at it as for the Lord. If that's your goal, then you're going to have the ability to do your very best every day, but you're also going to have the ability to say, Lord, I did my best and I still had a failure of a day, and God is going to surround you with peace and grace, and there's going to be days where you do just fail, and it's because of whatever, and you have to be honest with yourself on that, but don't spend so much time focusing on your failures that you don't focus on success. You want to really focus on just doing your very best. And, you are uniquely qualified to teach your children. God gave your children to you because he knew that you would be able to rear them and take care of them and meet their needs, whatever those needs are. And so, stand confident in that and do your best for the Lord. That's it. Any questions? Probably not. Anyway. All right, thank you. Say it's just a few minutes before noon, so we're finished on time. It's amazing.
Yep. Yeah, I got 2 minutes now, so I'm going to fill it up. No, thank you all for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Just as a reminder, there was contact cards out there on the table. So if you didn't fill one of those out, please do before you leave and put that in the box there, so we can harass you. No, so Melissa can keep contact with you. We're also going to share that list with Jerry, so he'll get you on the Education Alliance list. So anyway, so they can harass you. Yeah. So I'm going to close in prayer, and then we can go. God, I just thank you for these folks who have shared with us this morning, for the passion that you have given them and the vision that I think you have given those who are here for education of children. Lord, I pray that for the parents in here who are in the trenches right now homeschooling, I pray for encouragement for them. God, I pray that as they continue that work, that they would have a vision for what you're doing through their commitment to you and to their children. I pray that you'd give them a confidence that their children aren't going to be messed up because of this. And Lord, that you would bless these efforts, that these children who are represented here by these adults, as they mature and become adults themselves, would follow you with all of their hearts. And that they too would pass that on to the next generations. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this place, for Village Bible Church opening up this building for us to use today. Pray your blessings on those who are here. In Jesus' name, amen.